Well, hello there, William Carey University students. Here's another one of our, in this time of COVID-19, of having our worship colloquiums. It's kind of an online experience. But today, we are honored and grateful to be joined by a wonderful friend of mine and colleague that I've been able to work with, Don, for so many years. We're welcomed with a little time today with Mr. Don Moen. And welcome, Don. Thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, happy to be here, Luke. Yeah, interesting times. Got to get creative the way we teach, huh?
That's right. Well, okay, so for those of my students who, for crazy reasons, might not be as familiar with Don, let me tell you a little bit. And I've ripped this right out of the pages of Don's website, and I want to read something kind of real quickly here as I'm making his head kind of bloat up there. Website says, so ask Don what he does, and the answer might surprise you. He won't say he's a songwriter, even though he's written more than 100 songs, and a couple of them I know you would know. He won't say he's a worship leader, even though he's led worship on every continent but Antarctica and recorded numerous albums. He won't say he's a businessman or a producer, even though he's produced and directed hundreds of successful projects. If you ask Don Moen why God put him on this planet, he'll tell you to be an architect who designs products and events that help people experience God's presence in a new and fresh way. And in more than 3 decades of ministry, he's had lots of opportunities to fulfill that very purpose. That says a lot there, Don, but I believe that probably begins to hone in on maybe what has been a life purpose, life goal for you, is to encourage others and wanting to know more about the presence of God in whatever avenues that requires for you at that moment. So we're honored by you spending a few moments with us today. Now, I was reading your bio. Have you had that chance yet to lead worship in Antarctica, not update that yet?
No, I haven't had that opportunity yet. I don't expect it anytime soon. I did have a lot of course, scheduled, over this period of time. But guess what? Yeah, like all the other artists, everything's canceled. But
right.
Yeah, and I've had opportunities. I do love helping the idea of an architect, and that's what a lot of the students that you're teaching, they're going to end up in that situation where they're going to have to become an architect to try to create an atmosphere that welcomes God's presence. To try to, in order to do that, you got to know your people, you got to know your audience, and that's our job as worship leaders, to try to create that experience, help create an atmosphere that welcomes God's presence. And you do that so well, Luke, with all the times I've had an opportunity to work with you. Your background, my background, we've kind of seen both sides of it. The real conservative churches, the early days of Hosanna music, that when a lot of the Baptist churches would say, we can't listen to that stuff, but yet it's really been an interesting journey, and God has allowed me to do work across the board with so many people, as you have had the opportunity as well.
Sure. Well, and considering the many number of churches, and be it arenas, stadiums, that you have been able to have a platform in over the years. And again, not to blow up your head here even more, but you've become kind of a master at contextualization of, you analyze where you're going, who you're with, and what are the best songs and scenarios for this group of people. And in that, you're even having to face the challenges, because of the amount of overseas travel that you do, of potential language barriers, the thing of, is technology going to work the way it needs to? Is power going to work with my, with my plug-in? Just all those kinds of
Oh,
things. And
the answer is no.
no. So knowing that my students will hopefully, and they will, it's just they need to take advantage of these opportunities to lead worship or be able to run audio or video in various kinds of scenarios. And I want them to do that, is maybe kind of encourage them of, yeah, they're going to have challenges, but maybe some things that you think about, and you go into various scenarios of what you do to make the presentation, the experience, to be as applicable as possible to that scenario.
Sure. I think one of the most important things to remember is to think about who you're singing to. Think about your audience, because if you think about that ahead of time, whether it's a large group overseas or the seniors group at your church, to think ahead of time about the audience you're going to be singing to and what are the expectations of the organizer, whether it's your pastor or a promoter overseas, because you may think you're on the same wavelength as them, but when you get there, you realize, oh, no, we just wanted you for transition music to sing two songs while one speaker leaves and the other speaker comes up. It's a missions conference. And you might be thinking, we've rehearsed this beautiful worship set. We're going to bring people into God's presence, and it's going to be really wonderful. And what you're going to get is from the organizer, move it along. Though if you think about those things in advance, it'll put you at ease a lot more. And these are some of the things I've learned over the years, rather than reacting on the spot. And it's like, whoa, that came out of left field. I didn't realize that. It'll do you a lot of good to anticipate these things. If you're in an international situation, like I was telling you, will the technology work? Will the instruments work? No. I mean, it's getting a lot better, Luke, but some of the early things we did. I mean, the first time I sang in West Africa, my guitar player, who Matt Walding, got electrocuted because there was a ground loop. This is 64,000 people waiting for us to sing. Israel Houghton and New Breed was there too. And we were doing a sound check that was going on forever. And there was a ground loop in the system. So that when Matt plugged in his guitar and touched his microphone, he went flat down. He went right down on the stage. Just boom. He went down and he laid there. I thought he was dead. I really did. And I ran over there and picked him up, and I held him. I started praying for him. We all gathered and prayed for him. And it was a ground loop in the system. Of course, it's 220 over there, not 110. And that's something that is gonna, you're gonna burn up a few amps, and you're gonna burn up a few special effects for your guitar. But everybody does it. You're gonna plug in somewhere, and you think that you got 110 power, and it's not. The long story short, Matt Walding, he even had enough courage to go out with me again touring. But these are some of the things you get into when you travel internationally. Just things like shipping instruments. We were, the first time we went to India, we flew through de Gaulle and Paris. And I try to avoid Paris because every time we go there, some pieces of our equipment will get lost. And the first time we went to India, all of our equipment was stuck in Paris, and we arrived. We were supposed to do a seminar they had about 1,500 people there. My very first time in India, and Mark Baldwin was with me playing guitar on that trip, and we used all borrowed instruments. Mark had a Schecter guitar. It was called Schecter, and the strings were about this far off of the, it was not a good guitar. And it made me laugh. We were playing this song, and I said to Mark, take a solo. And he looked at me with these big eyes like, what? And I it was so funny to me. I said, play it again. You know, that's just Don Moen that you know very well.
Right. Oh, that's great.
Internationally, there will always be challenges, language barriers, of course. Again, you want to anticipate these things before you get there. Interestingly, every country is different. Canada is different. Holland is different, and England is different. Even though they speak, even in Holland, a lot of them can understand English, but in Canada and England, the audiences are different, and they're going to be, kind of looking at you like, I don't know or not. So it's all this stuff, and the most important thing I guess I can tell people is just be yourself. Don't, because people can smell a phony miles away. So be yourself. Don't try to be anybody other than who you are. And I think that goes a long way in connecting with your audience, whether it is in front of your church or whether you're on a stage with several thousand people in another country. I think part of it is just understanding I can only be who I am. That's the way your congregation is going to respond to you as well. They're going to look at you, and they're going to see what you're doing. And if you're trying to be Hillsong United or Bethel or Elevation Church, if you're trying to be all these hip, cool churches, you're at this little church of 150 people somewhere in a country church, your audience is not going to get that. I drop the key down 3 or 4 steps and sing "How Great Is Our God" in the key of G rather than C, like Tomlin. Those are the kind of things, yeah.
Yeah, consider your context, totally. So then, if you are in, somewhere in Asia, that they're primarily going to be speaking whatever that native language is, do you attempt to sing content in their language? Okay.
Yeah, I used to do it a lot more. In the early days, I was traveling with a group called Living Sound and Terry Law, and we were
Terry Law, yeah,
in Poland, and I learned 3 or 4 songs in Polish, so that I could sing it like a song, "We Bring the Sacrifice of Praise." Ofiarowujemy ci, chwałę i cześć, Panie nasz. And I exalt thee. Wywyższamy cię, wywyższamy cię, wywyższamy cię, Boże nasz. And I learned how to sing these songs in Polish. And Polish is hard, but I learned it. So, not a lot of people spoke English at all. A lot of the countries you go to, English is a second language, but in the early days in Poland, no way. To sing a song in the people's language, it always builds a bridge. And lately, in the last several years, like I went to, the first time I was singing in Tokyo, this is probably, 10 years ago now, I suppose, but the promoters said, just so you know, in Tokyo, people will not stand up, they will not sing with you, the Japanese will listen and they'll watch you. Okay, so don't be caught off guard when nobody does anything. And they're not going to understand your words. Well, I started singing. We had probably 1,500 people in that room, I suppose. And I started my first song. And by the 3rd bar, everybody in the audience stood and everybody was singing every word in English. Everybody stood except for the 2 promoters who were sitting on the front row going, oh, they just couldn't believe it. They're looking around. And I was in Vietnam with Luis Palau a few years ago, and we were in Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi. Hanoi, we got shut down. But in Ho Chi Minh City, we went out there to sing, and there was, I, I I suppose we had 10, 12,000 people there in an outdoor event. As soon as I started singing, everybody in that audience began singing along in English, every
Wow.
word. And I remember Luis Palau, he was sitting on the front row going, what, what, what are they doing? And I was just amazed, but that's what's happened these days with a familiar praise and worship song. It goes out, people learn it in English. So that's something in the early years of doing missionary evangelism, it wasn't the case. We did not have the distribution system we have now. We certainly didn't. There was no YouTube, no internet. And so songs didn't travel. Nowadays, a song that's big in the United States, chances are it's traveled internationally and the people will learn it in English, or they'll do their own translation of it. But yeah,
Right.
language, yeah, to sing in their language. I did 4 Spanish CDs and learned really I hired a Spanish producer, Isaac Hernandez. I don't know if you remember him, but
Mm.
and I said to Isaac, I said, Isaac, I want you to produce my vocals, and I don't want people laughing at me all over Latin America because of my accent. So he sat in the studio there at Integrity Music, and he grilled me with words and my pronunciation. And he would say, no. I said, well, he said, say it this way. And I said, well, that's what I said. No, you didn't. So I almost wanted to strangle the guy because it's like he's working me so hard, but he did it so well that all throughout Latin America, people think I speak Spanish. So when I go down there to sing, everybody comes up and starts speaking Spanish to me because Isaac did such a good job. But we did a whole tour down there, and I sang in Spanish every single night. Every one of my songs in Spanish, to the point where when I came back to the U.S. to try to sing "God is Good All the Time," I couldn't remember my English words.
That's great. Oh, that's awesome. So really, kind of what I'm hearing, kind of a heartbeat of what you're saying is to the students. Some are leading worship now, just depending on where they're at in their kind of their journey as worship leaders. Uh, Others will go find a great church at the point of graduation. But really, it's just own who you are,
Yeah,
find out what your context is, and just grab hold tightly to that and let that be what it is, despite it being different than what any grandiose ideas you might have about what Elevation or Hillsong or what have you might be doing. Find out who they are and embrace that,
yeah,
and be prepared for when they take those mission trips abroad or what have you, that things will go wrong. Technology is going to fail,
right.
but kind of smile and breathe through it, and God will make a way
Yeah.
through that.
It's going to happen. And so I guess over the years, one thing it used to distract me so much when things did not work technically,
Mm.
that it would really mess up my heart, my spirit, because I'd be so distracted by something not working technically. But I don't know. I don't think people are as sophisticated as we think they are. Audiences internationally, they're so happy to have you there.
Yep.
I I think it's good to use as much technology as possible, but you need to be prepared that the power is going to go out. And what are you going to do when the power goes out? Are you going to stand on the stage and look at each other? No, you're going to be prepared to sing one of those songs a cappella, and get the choir together, rehearse it ahead of time, anticipate it. If you don't have to use it, fine. But when it happens, if you think about it, prepare for it in advance, when it does happen, and it will, you're not going to be like, oh my gosh, what's happened? You're going to say, okay, power out. Everybody move to the front of the stage. we're going to lead the audience in this beautiful a cappella number. Be prepared. And people will be blessed by it. And if you can learn a song in their language, all the better. I mean, you will go a long way if you just learn a local song in one of the native languages. They'll be so blessed.
That's great. Well, I remember a statement, whether or not you remember making a statement many, many years ago. Well, I used to travel with you on Integrity's seminars for worship. And that was a statement that you at least made once. And that is an aim of your life is to help stamp out weirdness in the church.
Yeah,
and you know, because that sounds like you, right? And so with that being a continual aim of yours, you know, to do that, is there something kind of as we're wrapping up things here that you would love to maybe impart to my students, some sort of word of encouragement? You know, again, I have freshmen to seniors and worship leadership and worship technology students all going to be watching this. Just maybe something you can encourage them in that will kind of at least take them through the years of being who they need to be to the church when they kind of step out there.
Sure. Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, learn to serve. What happened, and that's such a big deal, and it's overlooked these days because nowadays someone just out of college or out of high school can get into a church and you're leading worship for 10, 15,000 people. And what happened, the years that I spent on the road, staying in people's homes, raising our support as missionaries, that's what we did. And we did about 1,000 concerts a year, a school in the morning, a school in the afternoon, and a church at night. Then we would counsel with people, pray with them, lead them into salvation, change our clothes, go to stay in somebody's guest room somewhere, and get up and do the same thing the next day, 320, 30 days a year. And that's what we did. And so I did that for 10 years. So after about 10 years, that's like about 1,000 concerts a year. It's 10,000 times I was in front of people. And I learned not to take Don Moen so seriously. And I learned to serve. And I learned that it's not all about a 5-star hotel. You know, now my tours, when I have a young band member come with me on tour, they go, "Oh, well, this is great." I said, "This is not the real world. It's not 5-star hotels." So I would encourage all of your students to learn to serve, because in serving, it builds a character.
That's good.
When the character is developed, then when God gives you a larger platform, you're going to be able to stay there, because you've built this character inside of yourself. So when difficulties come, and they will, don't quickly run away from them. I mean, some of you will have your first church gig out of college, and it's not going to be what you thought it was going to be. And there are going to be people that you may not like so much, especially like you're going to be talking to Chuck Harris next week, sound engineers. And, you know, people are going to look at you and give you dirty looks. Or if you're going to go in and try to introduce a new song, they're gonna, no way, you're not gonna change us. So I would just say your challenge, my challenge to you is to learn to love those people. And you know, Luke, it may be as simple as, first of all, learning to love your pastor and serve your pastor. Find out what your pastor really wants to say to his people. And it's not about you. And if your pastor says, take 10 minutes, take 8 minutes. If your pastor says, take 15 minutes, take 13. This is the way you're going to build trust with your pastor. You're going to build trust with your congregation. And the people that are looking at you coming in, I don't know if I like you so much. When you finish early and you get to know them, you're gaining their respect. I won't keep you long, but Paul Balash is, when we would work on a song together, Paul was great because he was at this little church in Lindell, Texas. And he would always try to, when we were like, thank you, Lord. or arise, 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 arise. And he'd be playing his guitar, singing this song and going, yeah, hey, Carol, hey, Lisa, how you doing? Come on in. Let's just get ask the Lord to arise in our midst. So he got to know the people. He put himself in their shoes. And another thing, while you're getting in front of people, don't forget that you're one of them. Make yourself touchable.
Mm.
Don't make yourself untouchable, because I can tell you, the people that are in your church look at you as a leader. They're going to think, wow, you're on the worship team. Wow, I could never be that spiritual. Wow, I wish I could do what they do. So they're already slightly intimidated by you. And you need to not run backstage between services, not run backstage after the service. Go out in your congregation and shake hands, get to know people, let them get to know you, that you're a real person, because the next time you get up to lead worship, they're going to say, I know Luke, I know him, I know his wife, I know his kids. He's just a real guy. That goes a long way.
Yes.
And I was so intimidated when I first started singing. I get on the stage with so many talented people, and I just kind of, it's like, I know why you're here. I know why you're here. Why am I here? And I remember I was singing at one of Bill Gaither's praise gatherings in Indianapolis, and it was Stephen Curtis Chapman and just everybody there. And we had an artist meeting, and I was so intimidated. I was standing over in a corner, and I just didn't want to say hi to anybody. And do you know who came over to me? Joyce Martin from the Martins. Joyce remembers this to this day, and I never let her forget it. But Joyce walked over to me in that room of super talented people. She goes, "Are you Don Moen?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "I want to say thank you for your music, and you got me through some of the hardest times."
Mm.
And Joyce went out of her way to make me feel welcome. And since that day, my wife Laura will tell you, I hate crowds. I hate going into a crowd of people. And I'll say to Laura, "What do I say if somebody says hello to me?" She goes, "Just say hello." And I don't like it, but you know what I've started doing? I'll get in a crowd of people where I'm with multi-artist things, or a crowd of people, a gathering. Guess what? Most of the people there are kind of intimidated and they don't want to be there. So what I've started doing is walking over to somebody and say, "Hey, I'm Don Moen, and what's your name?" I just introduce myself to somebody, because it's disarming. And as you go to your churches or tour, go to these international events, get off that stage and introduce yourself to somebody. The tech people that are helping you, they see artists all the time. And sadly, a lot of artists are so demanding, they never even say thank you. Get off the stage, and if somebody's helping with monitors or helping with the sound system, go over there and say, "Hi, I'm Don Moen. I just want to say thanks for what you do." So
That's great.
keep it real, and let people touch you. Let them know that you're a real guy, a real gal. That's going to go a long way in helping you learn to serve and connecting with your congregation wherever it is. And you'll have friends for the rest of your life.
Mm. That's good, Don. Well, we appreciate you taking some time with us today. In a perfect world, we would have worked out something to get you from Nashville down to the university to speak to our students in person, but here we are nonetheless. But we have technology.
No, that's where I went to school, in Hattiesburg, University of Southern Mississippi, on a violin scholarship from Minnesota. That now you know how old I am, 1968, I got a violin scholarship, and I went from northern Minnesota to southern Mississippi.
How about that?
Yeah, and there I was at the University of Southern Mississippi, and I was playing violin in the Gulf Coast Symphony, the Mobile Symphony, the Jackson Symphony, the operas, the ballets, and I even went to hear Neil Sedaka in his early years at William Carey University. Went over there.
How about that? Well, that's cool. You know our campus well. How about that? That's neat.
Yeah, a long time ago, but and two of our boys went to Southern Miss as well. So I know there used to be a Bob's Big or a Big Boy or a Shoney's or something. Many late nights I spent there.
Right there on Highway 49. If that's the one, there's still a Shoney's right there.
There was
That's it right there.
hung out. I could tell stories for the next 2 hours, but I'm not going to.
Well, thank you, Don, for encouraging our students. And I know you have a busy life, but we thank you for carving out a little time for us today. And students, I hope that you've appreciated this time with Don today. If you haven't before, I encourage you to go check out some of Don's music. And I know he would appreciate that as well. So, Don, thank you again. And
go to donmoen.tv and you can see what I'm doing these days because we can't tour. So I just kind of walk up in my office here and I tell my son to turn on the camera or the iPhone and I sing something. I share a scripture and I sing something. Talk about keeping it real.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
super.
That's what I'm doing now. Yeah.
Good deal. Well, thank you, Don. God bless you. Glad you're safe and healthy out there. All right.
Thanks.
Students, hope you enjoyed this worship colloquium with Mr. Don Moen. God bless you, Don.
Bless you too. Thanks, Luke.